Welcome, listener, to another edition of the Coco and Daltz podcast. We are real people doing real reviews. I'm not Coco.
And I'm not Daltz.
So tell me, Coco, the listener will know because they clicked on the display text that says what we're talking about, but tell them what we're talking about this week.
This week we have a timely review of a series that premiered almost 18 years ago.
What?
I know.
What?
Today we are reviewing Chappelle's Show.
Yeah, we are.
Which just recently, as of this month, came to Netflix and HBO Max. It premiered on CBS All Access back over the summer. It originally premiered in January of 2003. It's a sketch comedy show helmed by Dave Chappelle. It had one season in 2003. It had a second season in 2004. And then it had an extremely abbreviated third season with just 3 episodes because Dave Chappelle famously quit his show and they had a few sketches in the can, so they brought out a couple of the other people who starred in the show to kind of host those shows so they could burn off those final sketches.
That was like the equivalent to a band breaking up and they still have 2 albums left on their contract and they got to throw together B-sides and a greatest hits and stuff like that. So that's what that was.
Right. So like we said, this just recently came to Netflix, which is why we're reviewing it. We kind of wanted to see, does it still hold up almost 18 years after it premiered? Is it still relevant? Is it still funny? Daltz, what'd you think?
So I didn't know a lot about Dave Chappelle until we watched the David Letterman, My Next Guest Needs No Introduction segment with Dave Chappelle. I knew he was a comedian, and I knew he was controversial, and I knew this, that, and the other thing, but I never really watched much of his stand-up. And then when we watched that David Letterman segment, I was like, this guy's funny. He's kind of smart too, so let's get going. Let's have a look at the show. And then the show came on Netflix, and whilst we were watching it, listener, it rocketed to like the top 5. It was definitely right in there in the top 10 for a long time. It still might be today.
Everybody needs comedy right now because we're going back into lockdown, so people need not Chris Hemsworth extraction, faces getting blown off movies.
Right. We don't need any more destruction, like you said. So I was all in on this, and then we started watching it and liking it. And I got to tell you, I came out of it. So it's very uneven to me, the series in its entirety. So there's 23 episodes, I think, something like that, 26 episodes, and 28 episodes, sorry, including the last 3. And I think that in each episode, there's probably one really funny moment or sketch. So whether it's like the racial draft, which I thought was brilliant.
That was hilarious.
So somebody, people who are of mixed background, like Tiger Woods or Colin Powell, they're getting drafted by specific races so that they become 100% African American, or in Lenny Kravitz's case, 100% Jewish,
or in Wu-Tang Clan's case, 100% Asian.
Right, and it's really funny. But the thing is, be forewarned. There's a lot of F-bombs. There's a lot of N-bombs, and there's a lot of racial back and forth. I think it's in good fun. I mean, it's such a delicate balance when it comes to race and fun, and humor around race, that you want to be careful. But I mean, I'm a middle-aged white guy, so there's not a lot there that's going to offend me, but there might be some things that offend other people, so you just got to be careful. But I liked it. I got a good big kick out of it. The episodes are really short. I mean,
oh my God, they are.
They were like 22 minutes, and that included like "We'll be right back" and the musical intro guys, and so there's really only probably about, I don't know, 15 minutes of real content in each one of those episodes.
Yeah, I could have actually, a lot of the episodes ended with musical guests. So one episode ended with Common and Kanye. I think Wu-Tang did do something, like Mos Def did something. I could have actually done without the musical
me too.
segments. I would have preferred just another comedy sketch, although I can't imagine what that would take. I mean, Chappelle was saying that he was working 20-hour days, so I can't imagine what that would take out of you to try to get like another 5-minute sketch in when you could just hand it off to Common and Kanye and be like, hey guys, be brilliant.
Yeah.
I can just sit here and like nod my head along and do, you know, the dad head nod while you guys are going crazy. So I could have done without the musical guests.
Yeah, me too.
Really, but
What'd you think of overall, Coco?
I thought it was really funny. I didn't watch Chappelle's show when it originally aired. I did see a few sketches here and there because I had a coworker who loved it, who was always coming to work and being like, hey man, you got to see this Rick James sketch. And it was on the Comedy Central website or YouTube or something, and he would show me some of the sketches, and I thought they were really funny, but for some reason I just never actually watched it when it was on.
I didn't have Comedy Central when it was on, so that's probably why I didn't see it.
Okay. Yeah, and I had seen some of his stand-up and him in some movies, and I thought he was really funny. So when this came on Netflix, like I said, we're heading into another lockdown. I need humor. So I was like, let's watch this. And the episodes are all only 18 minutes long.
Yeah.
So we plowed through the entire series in like 2.5 days.
Yeah.
It's really easy to get through. The first few episodes of the first season were kind of uneven to me. It seemed like maybe they were trying to get their footing, trying to figure out what kind of tone they wanted, maybe how much they could get away with.
Right.
Before the standards and practices people came in with like the editing chop.
Does the Comedy Central channel have that? They have those guys?
Well, there was an episode toward the end of season 2 where it was just him introducing sketches that the Comedy Central standards and practices people would not let them air. Yeah. And so apparently, and one of them was like some black guys from today traveling back in time, and they shot a slave owner, and when that sketch cut out, he's like, apparently I'm the only person who thinks shooting a slave owner is funny. And I was like, dude, I thought it was funny. Yeah. I don't know, I mean, you're a slave owner, you get what you deserve. Right. And it's a sketch. It's a comedy sketch.
On
it's
the
not,
Comedy Network, on Comedy Central.
It's not a documentary,
right?
Unfortunately. So there was like a really sweet spot between like mid first season and mid second season where it seemed like everything was good. It seemed like maybe the last 3 episodes of the second season, I still really enjoyed them. I thought they were hilarious, but you could tell the wheels were kind of starting to come off a little bit, and he was kind of starting to feel like, what have I done? I've created this beast and it's getting away from me, because the sketches got kind of like more outrageous, and
he was really pushing the envelope.
Yeah, like more envelope pushing. And I mean, he's Dave Chappelle. That's what he does. But like even for him, it seemed like things were kind of going like off the rails
almost
little bit.
Like he was trying to get fired.
Yeah. So like I said, I still thought they were really, really funny. And that Wayne Brady sketch is like probably my favorite sketch of the entire series.
Oh, really?
Like I loved it. I thought it was hilarious. It was
Wayne
so
Brady, who had been given shots during earlier episodes, like Dave Chappelle said that Dave Brady made
Wayne Brady made Bryant Gumbel look like Malcolm X. That's the reason why white people like Wayne Brady so much.
Right.
And so this sketch is just Wayne Brady like being really angry about that,
being a pimp, and
you see like a whole different side of Wayne Brady, and he's like, is Wayne Brady gonna have to choke a bitch? And like it's just the funniest thing in the world.
It was really good. Yeah,
so that's probably my favorite sketch of the whole thing.
I think if you had an hour or an hour and a half maybe of this show, like the highlights, that segment or that particular piece would be really funny. So if you had just segments in that hour and a half of the best ones. So, like Charlie Murphy's stories of running into Rick James, obviously the famous I'm Rick James bitch emerges from that. And then playing Prince in basketball, some incongruously somehow they're playing basketball. And Charlie Murphy, of course, being Eddie Murphy's older brother. And Charlie Murphy passed away, unfortunately, in 2017. But I thought he was fantastic in this. I wanted to see so much more of him, and I'd never really seen him before or after. So watching him in this was a real eye opener for me. But I there's a lot of scenes in there, like it's pretty juvenile. The crack guy taking a crap in the alleyway, and then they zoom in on it, and it's
it's like a melted Snickers bar.
Yeah, it's a chocolate bar, but like you're looking at it and you're like, oh, did you really have to do that? And there's lots of pee and poo humor and stuff like that. I mean, it's really it's really on the edge. But like I said, I think there's something there. Like, as much as I didn't like the crap humor and stuff like that, there were other segments that just were hilarious. Like, you can just imagine the premise that they're sitting there, Charlie Murphy telling a story about Prince schooling him and his buddies in basketball. It's like, really, Prince? And so
wearing,
then there's
like, his full Prince outfit with the platform, like the 5-inch
the
platform
blouses,
boots. Like, he's not even wearing, like, you know,
and of course,
normal basketball gear.
Prince is played by Dave Chappelle, of course, to the hilt. And Dave Chappelle's impressions are fantastic. Like, it was Lil Jon.
Yeah, Lil Jon.
The Lil Jon segment was fantastic, and it was a running joke. But then they had Lil Jon, the actual real Lil Jon, on the other end of the phone. So it was Lil Jon impersonation against Lil Jon real person, and it was fantastic. I mean, that's gold right there. That's comedy gold. And everybody played along in this show too. Like, you had some people drop in, and they were playing along. Like Jamie Foxx was in one, and
Susan Sarandon,
right?
Yeah, I thought it was really funny. I'm sad there weren't more seasons. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, I guess I understand if you're in that kind of pressure cooker and you don't think it's going to end up being what it is. I guess I understand walking away from it, but it's like, I'm like you. I wish we could have seen more Charlie Murphy's True Hollywood Stories, and I wish we could have seen more of, like, the Mad Real World, where you've got, like, a fat white kid, like, thrown into a house with 6 black people, and it's like a send up of the real world. Like, that was super funny. I loved it. So
yeah.
And the thing with the racial humor is, I think, you know, it's not your job to educate people, but, you know, obviously he's trying to make people think, mm-hmm. right? So I understand, like, they did a sketch about, like, a racial thing, and then they talked to the audience afterward, and mm-hmm. one lady was like, yeah, I mean, we all laughed at the black people like fried chicken thing, but everybody likes fried chicken.
Right,
so
fried chicken is delicious.
Yeah, so why is that, like, only a stereotype for black people? And, you know, I think maybe that might have been part of the issue with the show, is, like, there's a certain segment of society that is willing to think about stuff like that, mm-hmm. and then there's a certain segment that's just like, you know, ho, 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 yes, of course, you know, it's true.
Right.
You know? Right. And he did say in one of the later episodes of season 1, or maybe one of the very early episodes of season 2, that he'd been out like doing some stand-up, and white people would come up to him and they were like, hey man, I love your show, it's great, and oh, you do those sketches with, like, the N-words, like doing this stuff, but they would actually use mm-hmm. the whole word. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't say black people or the N-word. Like, they would actually use that mm-hmm. word. And I'm like, I understand that it's desensitizing when you hear him say it mm-hmm. 87 times in an episode, but that doesn't mean that you can say it, and you're kind of missing the point, yeah. You know, if you're now using it and you think that's okay. So
yeah, and I know that I'm not a black man, obviously, but I find that word incredibly offensive. And I find it offensive when, no matter who says it, but I understand why they say it and how they say it. Like, he uses it in this show to talk about everybody. Like, it's like buddy to him. It's like saying, hey, pal, or whatever. And so he's really, like you said, desensitizing it, but also homogenizing it in some ways too, and making it, you know, really tampering it down. And that's where some people, I think, get offended and some people don't. Is like, this is still a really offensive word, no matter who you are, I think. Like, again, I'm not black, so I can't imagine what it would be like if a white person, you know, of somebody another race would say that to me. But at the same time, it's the way he rolls, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I thought the racial humor was funny, but not because I buy into the stereotypes,
right?
You know, right. And he stereotyped white people too.
Yeah.
So he's an equal opportunity offender.
Yeah.
In that respect.
And Asians and Mexicans.
There were some cultural references that, because this did premiere so long ago, that I didn't, if I had been watching this when it first came out, I would have gotten, like, some, like, oblique reference to maybe, like, a movie that came out at the time. Mm-hmm. But because we're watching it 18 years later, like, I'm sure stuff just flew right over my head, and it probably would have been funnier if I was watching it in the moment. Like, there was one episode really early on in the first season when he did a send-up of a car commercial, and the audience, the studio audience was going wild. And as I'm sitting here watching it, I'm like, oh yeah, I think I remember that car commercial, but I'm not really sure. So I'm sure if I had watched it 18 years ago, like, I'm sure there were a few things that probably I missed or that weren't as funny because it's almost 20 years later, but the commercial was still pretty funny.
I think it still holds up. I think I was a little bit worried about that because it started in 2003, and it's like, you can imagine where we were in the world almost 18 years ago, and what was happening in those days, and who was the president, and all that sort of stuff, and how different the world was. But it actually holds up pretty well, and it's because the episodes are so short. You're not the investment is very low in terms of whether you want to watch 2 or 3 of them,
right?
And if you get offended by them, then bail. I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world.
Right.
I think that in some ways he was ahead of his time, and that might have been why it was so jarring to the audience and critics. Critics liked it, but I think people embraced it too much, and it really ruined his life. Like, I read something saying that he couldn't do stand-up after that anymore because people were yelling phrases from the show at him while he was doing stand-up. And he just wanted to do stand-up. That's all he ever wanted to do. And then, of course, he infamously disappeared from the face of the earth and took all his money that he had and went away, and just recently has kind of reemerged into the mainstream again.
Yeah, in the past, 4 or 5 years, he's finally started, like, doing stand-up again and stuff.
Which I think is great, because I think we need more Dave Chappelle in the world. We need more, and his stand-up is very similar too, in that it's awkward and it makes you feel uncomfortable in some ways, but it also makes you think. And I think that's the point. Like, some of the things he says, like defending Bill Cosby about the rapes and stuff like that, he's sort of defending him, but he's not really. But is he? And it makes you think, and it makes you feel uncomfortable in those stand-ups. And I think that's sort of his style, is the making the listener and the viewer feel uncomfortable, and it's almost like a nervous laughter kind of thing. And
I think it's a testament to, well, maybe not to you, but I thought it was just hilarious, and I was dying laughing. And then there was one episode, it was probably in the second season, but he said something about, actually it was pretty early on, he started saying, like, oh yeah, we aired that episode of me being like the blind black Klans member, and I don't know that I'm black, and people were offended by that. And I was like, really? And then I was like, well, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Well, and then they did the gay Klan member who was dressed in pink and came up to the black family in the neighborhood, said, do you think maybe you want to move?
Yeah. So
have you ever thought about going back to Africa?
Yeah.
I was like, oh wow, like this, that's, some of that stuff is just on the edge, right?
Yeah. So I enjoyed it. I would give it like a solid B+ to A-.
Yeah, I think that's in my ballpark too. I think I would give it probably a mic and a half, a stand-up mic and a half, something like that. I think it's worthwhile. But if you're easily offended, and
Dad, if you're listening to this, Dad, don't watch this. Yeah,
and if you're of a certain generation, or if you're a QAnon or something like that, like I don't think it's for you. But yeah, generally I think it was a good view, and I'm looking forward to seeing what else he does. Like, his stand-up has been great, and I hope we get more. Maybe we'll get another, we'll get a Chappelle show. Maybe not a reunion because Charlie Murphy's not with us anymore, but maybe something like it, because I'd love to hear more of those stories.
Yeah, definitely. I'm down. And yeah, like Dalt said, you can whip through it pretty fast. The first couple episodes are like 17, 18 minutes. So watch a couple, and if you're not into it, turn it off.
Exactly. But if you need a laugh, try it.
Definitely.
And who doesn't need a laugh?
We all need a laugh these days.
So thanks for joining us again, listener. We're going to wrap it up, and we'll come to you with more exciting content in the coming days. So for another episode of the podcast, I'm not Coco.
And I'm not Dalt.